Hi, I'm Jalina Sekander, and I'm going to be reading my sources. This is 1 out of 5 sources. Inclusive School and Inclusive Teacher by Malika Mir Atta, Mahmood Shah, and M. Mumtaz Khan. The abstract. Page 1. Providing a quality education for all students in an inclusive settings has been acknowledged as perhaps the most challenging yet most important issue in education. The concept of inclusion places the stress on altering the system rather than the child. The inclusive school system is often thought as an inclusion of all students, regardless of ability, in the same schools and classroom with peers who are not considered to have disabilities. Inclusive school is a school where all children are taught to understand and appreciate human differences. Teachers and administrators receive the support necessary to include all students in regular education classroom. Parents' concern for their children is taken seriously. In inclusive schools, special education is a service rather than a place. Inclusive teacher is likewise a teacher who is equipped with general as well as special techniques for teaching and who can ensure quality education for all students. Keywords: education, school system, quality education, special education, inclusive teaching, inclusive schools. Introduction. Inclusive school Inclusive school is a school where all children are taught to understand and appreciate human differences. Teachers and administrators receive the support necessary to include all students in regular education classrooms. Parents concerned for their children are taken gravely. Supportive learning and peer instruction and strategies used throughout page 2. The school where all kids are given the opportunity to develop real friends, not just peers, buddies, or helpers. An inclusive school, the entire community honors diversity and supports quality education for all students. Philosophy of Teachers about Inclusion. Here's what teachers say about philosophy of inclusion. Kilwer, 2001. Inclusion involves all kinds of practices that are ultimately practices of good teaching. What good teachers do is to think considerably about children and extend ways to reach all children. Eventually, good teaching is a relationship between two people. Good results acquire the teachers because they enter into that relationship. Inclusion is very important in providing more options for children as ways to learn. It's structuring schools as society where all children can learn, but there's no formula for becoming an inclusive teacher or an inclusive school. It's not a preset system. Etched, 1999. Inclusion is based on the belief that people/adults work in inclusive communities, work with people of different races, religions, aspirations, disabilities. In the same stratum, children of all ages should learn and grow in environments that look like the environments they will ultimately work in. Heston, 2000. When good inclusion is in place, the child who needs the inclusion does not stand out. Strong parental participation includes in the inclusive curriculum, students making choices, and a lot of hands-on and hands-on involvement. East, 1995. Inclusion education means working of teachers with the students in that situation, which is suitable to a miscellaneous population of students. It also means that the teacher may need another, page 3. Prospect and goals for students, and it's complex to get teachers to do this. Inclusive education. Inclusive education means the achievement of all education is the right of all children in their own community schools. Inclusive education means that the classroom teachers have the final authority and responsibility for educating them. This does not mean all children necessarily receive all instructional services in the regular classroom. Kronberg, 1992. Inclusive education does not mean that students must waste every minute of the school day in general education classes. The students never receive small group or individualized instruction, and students are in general education class to learn core curriculum only. It means rather than if a trained disciplinary team decides that students require instruction beyond the normal development curriculum, needs services beyond the ability of the classroom teachers, example, mobility training or speech reading, or specialized services than them, which includes the classroom teacher, ensures that students receive the help in their community school. Moreover, the classroom teachers are in charge of orchestrating all required elements in his or her program plan. Standback, 1992. Some educators have suggested that inclusion means to get rid of special educators in a continuum of services. Example, individualized instruction and tutoring. We believe that inclusion means that those elements are brought into a regular classroom. Inclusion embraces the concepts of integration and mainstreaming and promotes the idea that everyone has a contribution to make, and a child's school experience should be the one that is maximized. Page 4. Non Maximize, not restricted. We agree with Rogers J., 1992. They note that inclusion means that the child's educational program is adapted to meet his or her academic or social needs, and that the child and teacher receive the support they need to succeed. Full inclusion never means simply placing a child with challenging needs in an ordinary classroom without adaptations or supports. Collier, 1987. Inclusion education can function on many levels. In inclusion education, the disabled student joins general education classroom for part of the day, depending on the type of strictness on the disability. In inclusion education, all students are in general education classroom instead of the special education classroom. Theoretically, this will eliminate the need for a special education classroom. Full inclusive education should allow disabled kids to be part of the various setting, teach social skills, foster independence, and provide opportunities to build friendship with non-disabled peers. Factors to be considered in this development of full inclusion classrooms should include age-appropriate placement in local public schools, integrated delivery of services in the general education classroom, social integration, curricular expectations adapted to the level that best challenges the handicapped student, homeschool partnership, staff development, team collaboration, and systematic evaluation and related services. Implementing inclusive classroom approach in schools, Salisbury, 1994. It is actually useful that the process of inclusion needs to occur within the larger context of a school where there is a clear philosophical teaming practices and a commitment to shared decision making. Unfortunately, not all schools and communities value the inclusion or teaming model of intervention, even though national Page 5. National mandates and policies call for provision of intervention services in mainstream schools. Laws alone are insufficient for changing attitudes. Stanback, 1993. Opponents of inclusive classrooms often refer to barriers that inhibit effectiveness of this approach. Some barriers include lack of adequate training in general, and special early education philosophical differences between two disciplines, lack of related services in many programs. Example, speech language therapy, physical therapy, etc., and lack of monitoring systems, and negative staff attitudes. Additional barriers have been identified by other researchers. Other researchers include the emphasis on academic achievement and the educational reform, movement competition for shrinking fiscal resources, lack of flexibility in the teachers' contracts, and lack of clear policy directives. All of these identified barriers are indeed real issues and need to be addressed in planning and implementing inclusive programs for he/she children with special educations. Unless these barriers of inclusion are adequately addressed, it will be difficult to convince reluctant schools and communities to move forward to adopt the inclusive approach. School-based learning. All parents want their children to feel confident and competent when they enter the school, yet there is no way to build an assurance that this will be the case. While this is true whether or not a child has a disability, the concerns are certainly magnified for children with special education needs. Common concerns expressed by parents of children with disabilities relate to the medical fragility or the special health condition. Example, seizures, asthma, immune deficiency, etc. Peer acceptance and making friends, participation in group projects. Example, listening to stories, playing group games, etc. And fear and distress in separating from parents. The transition from home to school-based learning places new expectations, page 6, and demands on the child and family. About child and family must become acquainted with new people in their lives and adjust to new schedules. Parents know that there will be certain school-related behaviors and their child will be expected to adopt. Inclusive teacher. To be effective, an inclusive education program must instill a pre-service teacher in understanding and appreciation of diversity. It means that they must be equipped with both general as well as special education techniques through pre-service and in-service, in quotations, training program. Pre-service teachers must also become comfortable with change and they must learn early on in their preparation to be flexible and creative. Our classrooms have undergone tremendous changes and those changes will continue in the future. It is one of the biggest roadblocks to inclusion has become the inability of educators to shift from one operational standard to another. This can be proficient by providing experiences that require forthcoming teachers to develop creative problem-solving skills and view situations from different perspectives. Some of the main essentials of inclusive teachers are under teachers' belief, values, and attitudes toward inclusive education. Many teacher characteristics affect the process of inclusive education. For example, the type of level of educational training and number of years of teaching experience. Ostensibly, the more training and experience teachers have in special needs education program, the greater their chances are successfully implementing educational programs and practices based on inclusive education, as if the classroom and teacher are, page 7, willing to teach the children with diverse learning and behavioral needs, and the chances are effective inclusive education are greatly increased. Inclusive education also depends on certain necessary values. Teachers need to value learning as a lifelong process in which they share responsibility with parents for maximizing the quality of the children's loved ones. They need to enrich children's academic and social competences, their colleagues, and the benefits of collaboration, and perhaps more importantly, the goals of inclusive education. It has been suggested that the most critical element of inclusive education is the attitude of classroom teachers toward children with special needs. Teachers' attitudes affect not only what happens in the classroom settings, but also the instructional option that is chosen for the students. Unfortunately, many teachers are opposed to having children with diverse needs in their classroom. This finding suggests that teachers must be given opportunities to confront their biases so that constructive and workable solutions can be developed. Attitudes vary according to the type of disabilities, the type of perceptions people have about disabilities, and the labels assigned to children with disabilities. Teachers' attitudes influence the nature of the interaction between students and teachers, as well as the students' achievement. Schrag, 1994, point out those teachers constantly communicates important messages to students about individual differences. It becomes obvious to all students whether teachers favor high-achieving students, feel respect, pity, or disgust for Chapter 8. Students who have special problems believe that every person has inherent value or a prejudice against those who are different. 2. 2. Enabling conditions for an inclusive education. The merger of regular and special education will not happen quickly or easily. This process requires, this is page 8. This process requires regular and special education to consult and collaborate with one another and to plan and provide adaptive instruction for all children. It also depends on teachers' positive attitudes and the resources available. From our perspective, the most important enabling conditions are professional training and development, pooling of resources, and administrative leadership and support. 3. Adaptive instruction. Inclusive education requires regular and special education teachers to respond and adapt innovatively and collaboratively to the unique learning needs of all students. Adaptive instruction assumes that each teacher will identify and provide a wide range of instructional supports that are needed by individual students to effectively master the learning and behavioral objectives. Wang, 1984. Adaptive instruction requires teachers to, quote, assesses the characteristics and capabilities of each student, collaborate and consult with others to plan developmentally appropriate instruction. They then make environmental and individual accommodations to facilitate student learning. They manage and instruct students in ways that permit those to master content as a pace suited for their abilities, needs, and interest. This will result in promoting all students' social ability and social integration. Page 9. On the basis premises of effective adaptive instruction programs is that a variety of educational objectives, instructional materials, and learning tasks is needed. Furthermore, success in achieving instructional objectives require a wide selection of teaching and learning strategies. Successfully implementing and practice adaptive instruction procedures depends on teachers' beliefs about students' diversity and enabling conditions on the educational environment. This is page 9. Professional training and development. Teachers' federations agree that present in-service training methods fail to provide successful integrated learning experiences. Teachers need information that will broaden their understanding and appreciation of children with special needs, for example, information how to identify learning problems and how to adapt the environment and their instruction to accommodate those problems. Their courses should include such things as dynamic assessment, individual educational planning, adaptive instruction, differentiated learning, and multicultural education, and holistic curriculum development, pooling of resources. Inclusion education will need a high quality of service requiring well-trained teachers, support personnel, example teachers' aides, transportation services, school building modifications, and material resources, example assessment instruction program materials, and instructional aids. Inclusive educational will page 10, impose additional financial demands on school board. Therefore, teachers must be trained to pool resources for inclusion. Collaborative teaming. Smith, 1993. The ultimate goal of collaborative teaming and the creations of collaborative school at its core are the professional relationships, particularly between teachers and administrators, and the unified goal of school-wide continuous improvement, and shared responsibility for the continuous improvement and shared responsibility for the continuous progress of all students within the learning community. Salisbury, 1994, quote, collaborative problem solving to promote inclusive education is typically carried out between teachers and other support professionals who get together to solve specific problems, usually concerning a student or group of students. Focusing on classroom-based interventions increases students' chances of success. Assistance might involve the interactions between the teachers and speech, language specialists, counselors, school psychologists, specialists in visual and auditory impairment, special education specialists, and other specialists bilingual education, reading, and mathematics. The relationship and collaborative problem solving is based on the mutually defined goals and a common framework. It involves shared authority for idea generation, mutual accountability for success, and the sharing of resources and rewards. Co-teaching. Reynolds, 1991. Co-teaching may refer to a cooperative teacher and collaborative teaching and is sometimes referred to as a team, page 11, teaching. Collaborative teaching requires a group structure and clearly defined roles for the participants. Collaborative learning requires only a collaborative goal. Team teaching is seen to be either an equivalent or a subset of co-teaching. Co-teaching is an activity in which special educators and general educators work together in one physical space in a variety of instructional activities in order to provide optimal instruction to the greatest number of students, achieving social integration. Researchers finding indicate that children with or without disabilities typically do not engage in high levels of social interaction with another unless they are encouraged and supported in doing so. Factors frequently associated with the lack of interaction including language and cognitive delays, poorly developed play skills, and behavior disorders on the part of children with special education needs. It takes a great deal of energy and creativity on the part of early childhood educators to achieve social integration between children with special education needs and their typically developing peers, as the levels of social interaction skills of these two people generally differ to significant extent. Individualized curriculum accommodation, Salisbury, 1994, quote, curricular adaptations are usually designed to serve two main goals: to promote positive child outcomes and optimize the physical, social, and instructional inclusion of child in ongoing classroom services. Do adaptations in an inclusive program usually achieve these goals? Results of page 12. Studies relating to each of these outcomes lend to support effectiveness of the inclusion with modifications model. Further studies, however, are certainly warranted. Such studies would do well to focus the effects and perceived value of the process by stakeholder groups, including school administrators, teachers, and parents. And then that's it.